These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare, Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Helps Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down and, as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Uygur Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their health care program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer health care systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like health care card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP, because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care, by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy May! It's the beginning of the new month here, or the first days of the new month, and it's kind of still spring here in Portland. I mean, maybe even winter. It's been cold and rainy, but You never know. Summer will come eventually. Anyhow, a lot going on the program today. I want to get into this question of basically a third of America has been lost to hate and bigotry. I mean, just completely signed on for it. What do we do about that? Is it time to move on? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Also, abortion, I should say, forced birth advocates want to impose a nationwide ban on abortion. Studies show that in Texas, women are still getting abortions by either getting, the abortion pills illegally in the mail. They're now banned in Texas, or by traveling out of state. If a nationwide ban goes into effect and the FBI gets into the act, that will all change. And also, what do you say in our first hour? Also, what do you say when someone's sitting next to you on a plane or in a theater or whatever it may be says, "Why are you still wearing a mask?" Some hilarious responses, and I want to crowdsource others. We'll talk about that in the first hour of the program. In our second hour of the program, Dr. Susan Rice, the president of Physicians for a National Health Program, PNHP, the premier organization of physicians in the United States. I believe they have over 15,000 members who are committed to a national single-payer health care program, will be with us to talk about Medicare Advantage and the whole Medicare Advantage scam, what's going on with that. Also, this new ACO REACH model. I'll tell you about, you probably haven't even heard about it. We'll tell you all about that. Also in the second hour, should America prepare for war if Russia uses biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons? Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger, the guy who's on the January 6th Commission, has introduced legislation in the House of Representatives to do just that. It's an interesting question. We'll talk about that in the second hour. And also in the second hour, we have an extraordinary geeky science. One bite from this tick and you are allergic to meat for life. Is this a new solution to climate change? We'll talk about that in our second hour. In our third hour of our program, we're going to open that with Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, the epidemiologist, the guy who was the first whistleblower on COVID way back in the day, and he's still leading the charge. Are we having an invisible pandemic? There is now the B4 and B5 variants circulating in South Africa, producing a brand new wave that is hitting that country pretty hard. Are they on their way here? Also in our third hour, did you know that Donald Trump asked the Pentagon to open fire on Black Lives Matter protesters? He said, can't we just shoot them? Seriously, this is from Mark Esper's new book. I'll tell you all about that in the third hour of our program. And at the very end of the show, Cenk Uygur is going to drop by, my buddy from the Young Turks. Cenk and I have known each other for years. And we're going to talk about another person who's a mutual friend of ours, Nina Turner, and her primary run in the state of Ohio for a seat there. So we'll get all this stuff. We'll get to all for the House of Representatives. We'll get to all that stuff in the 3 hours of our program here. I want to start out, though, with my rant from HartmannReport.com this morning. It's titled, "A Third of America is Lost to Hate. Is it time to move on?" And my basic premise is that it's time for us to stop normalizing these people. Oh, they're just Republicans. It's time to stop accommodating these white supremacists. Well, yes, we're going to have these people on our program, but we're not going to point out the fact that they're white supremacists. Yes, Tom Cotton or whoever it may, one of these Republicans was Josh? Yeah, I think, in any case, these Republicans from the hearings with Judge Jackson and whatnot, let's start calling them out. I mean, if a third of America is lost to racism, and I really think that's true, it's, roughly half of white people who voted for Donald Trump and who are just like, this is what they are stuck in the past. They want to return America to a past that was America when I was born. I was born in the 1950s, and I remember the 1950s, and it was a very different America. And we're not going to go back to that. But these people think they can do it. They really think they can do it. In the 1950s, the decade where I was born in 51, so I remember at least the last 5 years of that decade quite well. Blacks and other minorities, depending on where you lived in the country, were confined to certain parts of town. They were routinely beaten, arrested, or even killed for stepping into whites-only areas. In 1951, only 15% of blacks had been successful in registering to vote in the entire old Confederacy, in all of the former Confederate states. Only 15% could even get to register to vote, and then showing up to vote was a whole brand new challenge. With few exceptions, the only minority faces seen on TV or in the media, back in the 50s, it was mostly movies, were portrayed as either buffoons or criminals. Abortion was illegal, and in many states you could go to jail even if you were married for possessing birth control of any sort, including condoms in your own home. IUDs and birth control pills did not exist. Schools, restaurants, hotels, and most private businesses were racially segregated. Women, even white women, couldn't sign a contract, get a credit card, or open a bank account in their own names without a signature of a father or husband. Immigration into America was regulated to maintain the country's racial balance at that point in time. Gays and lesbians were routinely beaten, imprisoned, raped, and murdered with no consequence to their tormentors. And police had carte blanche to terrorize and kill minorities of all types. Since then, since the 1950s, a lot has changed. In the 1960s, in 1965, we changed our immigration laws so that they are now basically racially neutral. They're colorblind and, more egalitarian. We also changed our voting laws to make it a crime to forbid black people from registering or voting. And we changed our public accommodation laws, ending segregation in the United States. That all happened in the mid-1960s. The women's rights movement picked up steam after the legalization in 1961 of the birth control pill, but it was really in 1973, Roe v. Wade, that kicked off today's modern women's rights movement. And Republicans have successfully blocked the Equal Rights Amendment to this day. So we're not there yet, but step by step. And also in the 60s, full not just in the 60s actually, full citizenship for LGBTQ people picked up in the 90s after Reagan refused to even say the word AIDS during the entire 8 years of his presidency. But it picked up steam in the 90s and was finally realized in law, at least, when Vice President Biden and then President Obama endorsed gay marriage and the Supreme Court went along in June of 2015. We've seen these over the last 30 years, these changes in both law and culture. And at the same time, we've seen a response, which is straight white male backlash. And it is today, the white male backlash, white male supremacy, is the core product sold on right-wing television and hate TV, talk radio, and podcasts. The backlash has gone from passive resistance against integration to the Tea Party to openly declaring that Barack Obama was not a real American, to right-wing media embracing the Great Replacement theory, something that was first championed by America First actual Nazis 80 years ago. And so when we tried to realize our nation's founding creed that all men are created equal, that effort, largely by Democrats, has been twisted in the minds of Trump followers into a sinister plot to deny straight white men their place in their God-given role in American society. And now it's being used to justify political violence. 57% of Republicans say that January 6th was patriotic. It's being used to justify election rigging in 20 states or more. It's being used to justify court packing Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump. Tucker Carlson went off on this. I mean, he laid out the Great Replacement theory. As the New York Times they outed him over the weekend in just this breathless, brilliant piece. And this virulent form of white supremacy is also spread to our churches. I realize you could say it's always been there. In fact, the churches were among the leaders in supporting slavery back in the day. But nonetheless, today, when PRRI asked if Trump had encouraged white supremacists, a majority of black and Hispanic churchgoers said yes, 75 and 68%. But when they asked white churchgoers. Is Trump encouraging white supremacists? 43% of Protestants and Catholics said no. Said yes, and only 26% of evangelical Protestants said yes. 74% said, no, Trump's not encouraging white supremacy. So what do we do about this? Well, I'm of the opinion that these people are lost. There's no possibility. Occasionally I'll debate conservatives on this program, or conservatives will call in who are listening on our, on the radio stations and whatnot. And engage me in dialogue. And over time, I've had a number of those conservatives say, you've convinced me the Reaganism was a disaster, and we need FDR's, we need to embrace turning America into a country that works again. But I haven't had, in the 19 years I've been doing this program, I haven't had one single white racist call and say, you convinced me I should stop being a racist. I should stop being a white supremacist. Not one. And I think we should just, give up. It's a third of America. They're lost. It's time to get on with the business of running the country. We need to have strong laws against their behaviors. We need to prosecute them when appropriate, when they break the law. When they're not breaking the law, we need to just say, hey, it's a free country. People can say and do anything they want, as long as it doesn't hurt other people, and we're just going, we're going to let these people go. And when politicians, like the guys who tormented Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson on the, in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, when those people come on television, particularly on the Sunday shows, they need to be identified as white supremacists. Our media has really fallen down on this. White supremacism has seized the Republican Party, and it is never, ever mentioned in the media. It's time to call these people out.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What say you? Also, I got to tell you about this nationwide ban on abortion. And what do you say to somebody who says, why are you still wearing a mask? And welcome back, Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, thanks for watching us on Sirius XM. What's up?
Thank you, Tom, for taking my call. It's just a simple question. I'm so frustrated with the DOJ about this insurrectionist and Trump and so forth. When is this guy going to go to jail? I mean, it's unbelievable. They are still at it. They're still planning to overthrow and cheat on the next election. They are committing treason openly. And the DOJ is asleep. I mean, when is this guy going to go to jail?
The DOJ is running a grand jury right now, Alfredo. It's just that they don't leak like everybody else does, like the January 6th committee does. I mean, the January 6th committee is doing everything but issue press releases. Well, even occasionally they issue a press release. The DOJ never does any of that. So I share your concern. I would have liked to have seen them get very, very active in the immediate aftermath of January 6th. And it looks like it took them a year or so to decide to do anything at all. But I think that, it's a slow-moving train, but it's picking up speed. And like a train, it's going to have incredible momentum. It's got a lot of mass there, so I'm not concerned, frankly.
Well, I hope you're right. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, good talking to you, Alfredo. Willie in Albany, Georgia. Hey, Willie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Mr. Hartman. Second time that I've talked to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to let you know that your rant just now, or your statements right then, were just outstanding. I've been trying to call you for about 3 weeks now, and I wanted to ask you a question. What are your memories of the day that Dr. King was assassinated?
I don't have a specific memory of, like watching the TV kind of thing. I don't have one of the JFK assassination either. I think I was in school when it happened, in elementary school. I remember watching the TV and talking with my parents later. But I do remember a deep sadness at that time. Why?
I mean, why were you sad, if you don't mind me asking?
Because I thought of Martin Luther King as a Jesus-like figure. I thought of him as one of those moral characters who leads us all in a positive direction. And I thought that his assassination was a terrible loss for America and the world. I remember that. And I mean, this was 1960. What was it? What year was the assassination? Say that again?
1968.
68? Yeah. Yeah, I was 17 at the time. Well, yeah. I thought it was a terrible thing. Why? Why are you asking?
And last thing, real quick, because I know you're busy. Again, I heard your statements earlier. How does this connect with, how does that moment, that pivotal moment in American history, connect with what's going on now? There's still the white supremacy.
I would say, if anything, the white supremacy movement, Willie, has expanded significantly since 1968. I'm guessing that probably 2 or 3 times more white Americans are openly and virulently racist now than they were then. It might have been a latent thing then. It is out in the open now. They are proud of it. Willie, I got to run, but thanks for the call. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. The recent killing of a young black man in Michigan, Patrick Loyola, who was, the police officer was sitting on his back and put a gun right to the back of his head and shot him, is just the latest example of police killing people out of traffic stops, and predominantly black people. 28% of the people who are killed in traffic stops are black, but African Americans are only 13% of our population. Police in the United States have killed nearly 600 people during traffic stops since 2017. Mapping Police Violence is the nonprofit that's been doing the work on this. About 10% just this year, about 10% of the 1,100 people killed by police this year have been killed at traffic stops. Dante Wright, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, we know their names and we know their stories, but we're not doing enough to get this under control. Other countries tend not to have this problem. We need to do something now. There's a video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. By the way, I'm on my rant on a third of America's lost to racism. It's time for us to just say to hell with them. Susie Coyote, I posted that at Hartmann Report, and Susie Coyote replies, I grew up, you can reply to my posts over there. I grew up in the 50s as well. America is not going back to that time. Women are not going to give up birth control and go back to the kitchen barefoot and pregnant as unpaid servants. Not even the most vocal and vicious of the female Republicans, Boebert, Green, will go back to that despite their rhetoric. I would point out, by the way, that over the weekend, Marjorie Taylor Greene said that basically women need to be married. That should be their role. In fact, I've got the, let me see here. It was so bizarre that I flagged it. Here it is. She says, she's talking about Democrats. She says they want to pay for child care. They want to have a living wage. And these are things that are never going to solve the problems, actually. Why does a woman need to be married if she can be married to the government and keep getting a government check? Right. So anyhow, back to Susie Coyote on Hartmann Report. She says, can you imagine Laura Ingraham putting on a prairie dress and becoming a good submissive wife? Gays are not going back in the closet. They're done with that. They now have families, children, marriage, and a stake in the national identity. Blacks will no longer sit at the back of the bus as they did when I was a child. They won't use the back door, drink from separate water fountains, or stop protesting police brutality. The hateful 30% can cause sporadic civil unrest and likely kill innocent people, but they can't stop history no matter how hard they try. Amen. Now, here's a group of people who are trying to bend history. This is from the Washington Post today, Carolyn Kitchener. Leading anti-abortion groups and their allies in Congress have been meeting behind the scenes to plan a national strategy that would put into place a strict nationwide ban on abortion if Republicans retake power in Washington, D.C. Activists argue that in Texas, Republicans have paid no apparent political price for banning abortion after 6 weeks. Some activists and Republican lawmakers now say that the 15-week laws are not ambitious enough. Seriously. James Langford of Oklahoma agrees. Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican from Ohio, is planning on introducing legislation in the Senate to ban abortion nationwide. The author, Carolyn Kitchener, the author of this piece for the Washington Post, said that, Marjorie Danisfeller, the president of Susan B. Anthony's list, has spoken privately with 10 possible Republican presidential contenders, including Trump. They all assured her that they would be supportive of a nationwide ban. How's that going to work out?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll get into masks on the other side of this break and then your phone calls. So stick around. We'll be right back. Our book today is The Poisoned City, Flint's Water and the American Urban Tragedy by Anna Clark. This is from the prologue. On a hot day in the summer of 2014 in the Civic Park neighborhood where Pastor R. Sherman McCathern preached in Flint, Michigan, water rushed out of a couple of fire hydrants. Puddles formed on the dry grass and splashed the skin of the delighted kids who ran through it. But the spray looked strange. The water was coming out dark as coffee for hours, McCathern remembered. The shock of it caught in his throat. Something is wrong here. Something had been wrong for months. That spring, Flint, under the direction of state officials, turned off the darkening water that it had relied on for the drinking water that it had relied on for nearly 50 years. The city planned to join a new regional system called the Carragnondi Water Authority, and while it waited for the KWA to be built, it began bringing in its water from the Flint River. McCathern didn't pay much attention to the politicking around all this. He had enough to worry about with his busy parish. But after the switch, many of his neighbors grew alarmed at the water that flowed from their kitchen faucets and shower heads. They packed public meetings, wrote questioning letters, and protested at City Hall. They filled clear plastic bottles in their taps to show how the water looked brown or orange and sometimes had particulates floating in it. Showering seemed to be connected with skin rashes and hair loss. The water smelled foul. A sip of it put the taste of a cold metal coin on your tongue. But the authorities said everything was all right and you could drink it, so people did, McCathern said later. Residents were advised to run their faucets for a few minutes before using the water to get a clean flow. But as the months went by, the city plant tinkered with treatment and issued a few boil water advisories. State environmental officials said again and again that there was nothing to worry about. The water was just fine. Whatever their senses told them, whatever the whispers around town, whatever Flint's troubled history with powerful institutions telling them what was best for them, this wasn't actually hard for people like McCathern to believe. Public water systems are one of this country's most heroic accomplishments, a feat so successful that it's almost invisible. By making it a commonplace for clean water to be delivered to homes, businesses, and schools, we have saved untold lives from what today sound like antiquated diseases in a Charles Dickens novel: cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever. Here in Flint, it was instrumental in turning General Motors, founded in 1908 in Vehicle City, as the town was known, into a global economic giant. The advancing underground network of pipes defined the growing city and its metropolitan region, which boasted of being home to one of the strongest middle classes in the entire United States. McCathern is a tall, bald man with a thin mustache and a scratchy rasp in his baritone voice. At the time of the water switch, he had led the non-denominational Joy Tabernacle Church for about 15 years.
It was founded in the YMCA in downtown Flint, where it held baptisms in the swimming pool. But in 2009, it made a home in Civic Park, where a Presbyterian church closed after 85 years and gave its sanctuary over to the young and hopeful congregation. By then, Civic Park, one of America's oldest subdivisions, was a desert of deserted, historically significant homes, the pastor said. Built between 1917 and 1919 by General Motors and DuPont and Company, along curving tree-lined boulevards, the tidy houses were designed for Flint's auto workers and their families. But over the years, the neighborhood was blighted by vacancy. Empty 2 stories with lurching front porches and crumbling roofs sat alongside crisply painted homes where Flint residents, they sometimes call themselves Flintoids or Flintstones, still live their lives. When the sound of gunshots on the street outside interrupted services, McCatherine gave a nod to the church musicians, urging them to play louder. Some called Joy Tabernacle a thug church, he said, but McCatherine saw the good. The young men filling his pews built a proud society, if not by getting their names on the honor roll, then by tagging their names with spray paint. In the end, people just want to be seen. The ghosts of the past went well beyond Civic Park. Between General Motors and the United Auto Workers, the city had been a flourishing hub for American innovation. There were more than 100 different manufacturing establishments in town. 10 of them employed at least 1,000 people each. And they not only made automobiles, but paints, varnishes, tools, dyes, cotton, textiles, and a wealth of other products. Flint had one of the highest per capita incomes in the entire nation. And despite being severely segregated, it was a magnet for African-American migrants from the South. When Vice President Hubert Humphrey stopped by during the campaign for the 1964 presidential election, he praised Flint for, quote, zooming ahead with unbelievable growth and progress. Workers earned wages that are very good, Humphrey said, and, quote, because of the great labor management program in the community over many years, there has been a constant rise in the standard of living, end quote. Away from the assembly lines and the executive suites, the people of Flint felt that the city just shouldn't be a place to work. It should also be a place to thrive. Charles Stewart Mott, an auto pioneer who became GM's single largest stockholder and 3-term mayor, created a nationally renowned community schools program that provided education, skills building workshops, and social influence and social services. The book, The Poison City.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. It's 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Okay, so there was this thread on Twitter that started out basically, somebody was apparently on a plane and said, you know, I keep getting asked, why am I still wearing a mask? And I'm wondering what are good responses. And, you know, there were a few you know, kind of funny responses to this, like, well, because I have COVID, right? Which immediately causes people to back up, because I have COVID now. But, or, I just back from Africa, I was exposed to Ebola, or because I don't want to do what the government tells me to do, and the government tells me I can take my mask off now. I'm not a sheeple. You know, there was a bunch of funny ones there. So do you have a funny response? What, has anybody asked you, why are you still wearing a mask? I found, you know, I had to go into the Home Depot on Saturday because I've got a circuit breaker that feeds the power in my house to my office, and thus my computers and my work, and it's got a ground fault interrupter, and it's failing, as those GFI circuit breakers often do. This one was installed in like 1980 when the house was built, and so I went looking for a replacement, and I was like the only well, I wasn't the only person. There was an older couple who looked like maybe in their 80s, who had masks on, who were walking around in there. But everybody else was barefaced. And, but you know, what I noticed, there was one guy working in there who had a mask on. Everybody else didn't have masks on. But what I noticed was that nobody seemed to care. Nobody gave me weird looks. Nobody treated me odd. It was, I think, kind of no big deal. But apparently there's this epidemic of people not wearing masks, coming up to people with masks and saying, how come you're still wearing a mask? So what do you say? Anyhow, picking up your phone calls. Nick in Santa Barbara, California. Hey, Nick, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Very happy to talk to you.
Thank you.
I have a comment on, I heard, this morning you were talking about white supremacy and racism. And back in Bulgaria in the 80s when communism was flourishing, how they said back then.
Is that where you're from?
All these African... Huh?
Is that where you're from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So we had all, the only black people in Bulgaria were in the universities coming from Africa to study. And we had there was no looking down on them. And then, I don't know how it happened, but probably through the movies or something, we never had this relation with the American society had with the black people here, slavery, all this nonsense. But we, as a majority, we were prejudiced, looking down, racism.
Yeah.
So, it's back in the day, we look at ourselves, we were the worst because we couldn't get out, and everybody was coming in with foreign currency, so they were able to do better. And for us, they were doing better than us. They were good people, they are, but we didn't have any issue with that. And later, I don't know what happened, but many of the Bulgarians are just talking nonsense racist here.
Yeah, it is spreading around the world, Nick, and certainly the Russian troll factories, which are apparently back up and running in a big way. I'm noticing it on Twitter again, having to block, half a dozen people a day. And you go back and you look at their profile, and it's, they've got, they're following 10 people, including me, and they've got 6 followers, and they've been on Twitter since 2017. And the 4 things that they've retweeted are all Tulsi Gabbard memes. Oh yeah, it's a Russian troll. It's fairly obvious, but it's being promoted. It's being promoted. Nick, thank you for the call and thanks for sharing your story with us. It's fascinating. David in North Miami Beach. Hey, David, your thoughts?
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Yes, I'm afraid you're wrong. They don't want life in the 1950s. They want a cartoon version of the 1950s. They want the caste system. They want the prosperity, but without the sacrifices made in the 30s and 40s to get there. So I would give them the vote. Fine, go back to the 50s. You can, sexism and classes and all that good stuff, but you have to pay the full taxes and reinvestment, or a truly meritocratic caste system, a little more militaristic, actually based on experience, education.
Oh, that's interesting. So
someone to look down on.
Right. Let me finish your thought, and I'll rant.
Since I need someone to look down on, so at least let's try to make it somewhat on the merits. Be a bit of a gerontocracy at risk, but at least it would be the trade-off of, like the military, that you have more benefits and privilege, based on putting skin in the game instead of being born on third base and called a triple.
I get it. So in other words, they want to go back to the 50s. They want to go back to racial segregation. They want to go back to women being under men's thumbs. They want to go back to abortion being illegal, all those things. But they don't want to go back to a 91% top income tax rate. They don't want to go back to an era where a third of Americans were unionized. And granted that it was only white men, but nonetheless, they don't want to go back to an area where unionization was widespread. I totally get it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, David. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a summary, because we're about the same age. Currently, what's happening based on the Trump ideology, with that Access Hollywood video, which would have ruined the campaign for most people, but it actually helped him. Because I saw an interview with I'm actually middle-aged lady after that. She was a registered Republican. She said, you know, boys will be boys just as long as he keeps those Muslim terrorists and those Mexican rapists away from me. That's what she said, okay? That's the mentality that's going on. That's why 74 million people voted for that guy.
I think it goes beyond that, Tim. I think by asserting that he could grab women by the crotch whenever he felt like it, he was asserting power. He was asserting white male power. And for Republicans, that's exactly what they want to hear. And that's what
she said. Boys will be boys. Basically.
Yeah. Well, look at Herbster. I mean, over the weekend, Donald Trump was out in Nebraska, whatever that state is, where this Herbster guy is running, and Trump was there to endorse him, and he's been accused by 6 or 8 women now of groping them, including
sexual
one
molestation.
Yeah, including one just last week. She walked by and he reached up under her dress and grabbed her. And Trump is like, yeah, they'll say anything. And the Republicans are like, yeah, who cares? You know, because he's asserting power and authority. He is a real man. That's what's going on. Yeah.
And if you look at that 50s and 60s era, you know, how important TV was, because that was a real transition in the society.
Yes.
And then you look at a program like Richard Buell and Have Gun Will Travel, where he came from the famous hotel and the employees, he called them Hey Boy and Hey Girl. You should remember that?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? That was, and then you looked at Hop Sing on Bonanza, which was on for 13 years.
Yep.
And how many black friends did the Cleavers have? You see what I mean?
Right,
Those were important aspects of communication to the American public back
absolutely.
then.
Everybody, all minorities were either written out of the media, first movies and then television, or when they did show up, they showed up typically as buffoons or criminals. There was the occasional entertainer, you know, Sammy Davis Jr., but he was the exception that proved the rule. He was with
the Rat Pack.
That's right. He was the little touch that allowed them to say, "Oh, we're not like the rest of those people." Wink, wink. Yeah. Spot on, Tim. Very, very well said. Eric in Serafina, New Mexico. Hey, Eric, what's up?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey.
My first comment's on the mask.
Yeah.
My comment would be, I don't want to infect you with COVID-19. I just got tested positive on Thursday.
And
I have until the 9th to be covered up so I don't infect you.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I took it off?
Exactly.
On from there, I grew up in northern New Mexico, where it's a lot of, back in the late 40s, early 50s, there was a lot of prejudice between the Hispanics and non-Hispanics. And I grew up prejudiced. And then I moved to Hawaii in 1968, where there is no majority. And I learned that it doesn't matter what a person looks like. I had 2 roommates that were half Hawaiian, half Chinese. There was a Jamaican musician came over to play with my roommates. One of my roommates was a Norwegian. There was this incredible mix of genetic material that got together. They were all great people that you could trust to be friends and not try and screw you over. And that attitude has stuck with me ever since. I'm 80 years old now, and I've seen from experience that it really doesn't make any more difference what a person looks like than the clothes they wear.
Yeah.
When it comes to telling what kind of a person they are.
Yeah.
And it's such a loss to have all this prejudice getting in the way of all that. There's so many resources that are just going to waste because we won't talk to people that don't look like us.
I agree, Eric, and you know, go back to the black rat, white rat study and others that show that the best way to solve racism is to have an integrated society. It's for people to live up, grow up living near and knowing and interacting with and working with people of different races and different backgrounds and different gender identities. And I mean, you fill in the blanks. When people get to know other people, they stop thinking of them as other and start thinking of them as we. And that is the first step, and that's what we need to be doing. That's where we need to be putting our efforts. And frankly, to hell with the white racists who are yelling and screaming about it. I'm over it.
I agree.
Yeah,
Eric, thank you. Example.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. It's a good one. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, not too much, Sean. I want to comment on the Adam Kinzinger, the bill he put forth.
Right, the authorization to use military force in the event that Russia uses chemical or nuclear weapons.
Yes, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm afraid that all rational people are going to sound that way now. We've entered that phase. I believe the reality is, and I said it a couple weeks ago to another host who really ridiculed me for it, we should prepare for war, and we should prepare for possible nuclear war.
Well, this is what I said a week and a half ago, as I recall, or maybe it was early last week, is that we are being prepared for war. And I don't mean like it's some horrible conspiracy on the part of our media and politicians. Circumstances, as much as anything else, are preparing for us for war. But we have to recognize it.
Yeah, we have to recognize it. There's a lot of unspoken truths. Like Russia could disintegrate into warlordism, okay? And nuclear weapons could become, like, available to anyone. And also the, as far as nuclear war goes, if you're like, well, Dave, you sound like a bedwetter, look, I would advise you to go back and look at the Japanese citizens after Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the ones that did not honor kill themselves or others, the ones that survived explosions and went to U.S. treatment facilities where those unbiased medical workers just filmed a lot of their ailments, their infirmities, right?
Yeah, the horrors.
Go back and look. Yes, you might want to go back and look at that. You think it's a no big deal, like you're just shooting off a firecracker or something, right? Nuclear warfare has all kinds of secondary, tertiary effects, order effects.
Right. And the other thing to remember is that the so-called battlefield nukes, in general, are between 5 and 10 times larger than the Hiroshima or Nagasaki bombs. These are the little ones.
Well, and remember, the law has always said, the law has always said an enemy can use a combatant can use whatever means they have to end the violence quicker. There is no restraint. This is all an illusion. And Vladimir Putin knows this, okay? And this thing could escalate out of control very, very quickly. And me, Tom, I live in Federal Way between Tacoma and Seattle. I don't have the financial means to move away from a first strike area. But if I did, I would. So my conscience is clear on that. Mm-hmm. All right? My conscience is clear.
You consider Seattle a first strike area, in other words?
Absolutely. If I was living in Oregon, I would move, and as a matter of fact, I might move from Washington to Oregon. I'd move out near Sisters or the Newberry Caldera area. And that's my professional opinion. Yeah. And I don't know if you saw it, but there was also a report on Russia doing the data dossiers. And I said that, and everyone, I mean, you didn't, but I've also...
On the what dossiers? What are you talking about?
They're doing data dossiers on the Ukrainians. They're doing them. They're databasing. It's for real identity. I told you when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's the problem we had. Is figuring out true identity. If you put them in a computer can figure it out and give you probabilities. Like I can't lie and say I'm Thom Hartmann to the Russians. They won't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave. Thanks a lot for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. I don't know if you caught this, but there was a piece of legislation before the House of Representatives that explicitly required the U.S. State Department to preserve any evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine, to gather reports of it, to preserve it, presumably in anticipation of some sort of a war crimes prosecution. And for reasons I can't quite figure out, maybe you have an idea, 6 Republicans voted against this. No, we don't want the war crimes of the Putin administration to be. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Warren Davidson from Ohio, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and Paul Gosar from Arizona. I'm scratching my head here. Why would these 6 Republican politicians not want us to preserve the war crimes evidence? There's a video about this that you can see over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Nancy in Elkhart, Indiana. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello, Tom.
Hey.
When we were talking about, when I was reading your rant this morning, and then when you really explained what you learned about in the 1950s about this racism, well, I don't think we had a name for it. When we heard about it, when I read about it in school, actually we didn't read. The teachers explained it to us. We heard about those northern fantastic soldiers going and doing something with the southern soldiers. Our northern soldiers were so great because they were going down south, they were down to help getting those slaves freed. Mm-hmm. And, if you need to help someone, that must mean they're inferior to a child's mind.
Yeah.
And even as I got older, I can remember specifically, how our parents were in World War II. And when we would I asked my mother specifically, hey, what was Dad doing in World War II? And I was probably about, I don't know, maybe this would be in the 60s or something. And she would explain, the Germans were doing things against those Jewish people. Like Bobby, someone that I would know. And I'd say, well, what did they do wrong? Well, the Germans didn't like them, so there's a kind of racism. And, they would say something about putting them in gas chambers.
Yeah.
Why? And nobody explained why, ever.
Yeah, I recall no conversation in elementary school, junior high school, or high school, frankly. And that, for me, that was, I went into elementary school, I think, in 1955. And during that entire period of time, I recall no explicit or specific discussion about racism. Now, Louise went to East Lansing High, and that's a college town, and, a lot of the kids were children of professors at MSU. And she recalls a very specific class in high school on racism, where they read Black Like Me, and they read Dick Gregory's book, the N-Word book.
That was college for me, yeah.
Yeah, they read several books, and it changed her life. I mean, she still literally still talks about it now, all these years later, and that was in the 60s. But in Lansing, I experienced none of that. Just the idea of race, and that's the key to white privilege, is that you don't even have to think about race.
It's going to take years and years until that gets embedded in a generation's mind. Well, I had my first black teacher. I'll never forget Mr. Pittman. I had him in 8th grade, and I was enthralled, to hear him. He wouldn't talk about it, but I thought, I've never seen an educated black person.
Yeah.
And then when I got in college, I took a class called Learning About, it was an extra. Remember how we would take extra classes? Mm-hmm. Anyway, and then when I went to college, I brought home a couple books, and my brother told me later, he was my little brother, he was like in 7th grade, and just like you said, I had something by Dick Gregory, and he read it. And later on, but the idea, I was learning about racism, and then when I was just shocked. Anyway, when I became a teacher, I just worked on that racism with my children, and I'm 72 years old, and I will do it constantly. And so that the whole idea is, I think it's going to take generation after generation we had black and white children in our schools. It's going to take years to get something that's poisonous in a culture. And if we don't keep doing it, it won't go away.
And this is why, particularly in heavily segregated areas in the South, like Texas and Georgia, this is why the white power structure does not want the history of racism in the United States taught. It does not want, the true history of the Civil War taught. It doesn't want anything to do with it. And it's not just they don't want critical race theory. I mean, they literally don't want their students to know that the South had ceased to be a democracy over the issue of race, over the issue of slavery by 1850.
And they don't want to see pictures of hangings. They don't want to see. They don't want to have them see the show Roots. Oh, that should be a requirement.
Yeah, that was a big deal, and that was what, in the 80s, the 90s?
Oh,
that was the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah. 90s. Anyway, those things should be requirements. Well, I babble on, but anyway, I think you've got to have education, and those people that don't look Trump people are just not educated. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you, Nancy. And this is at the core of the whole book banning, book burning thing. Is don't expose children to these ideas. Now, the upside of this is that this generation growing up, the Zoomer generation, as it were, this is the most integrated, most diverse generation in the history of America. I believe that's a good thing.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The hidden history of Big Brother in America, how the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance threaten us and our democracy, by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is the second, Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America by Carol Anderson. This is from the introduction. It was like a snuff film, that July 6th, 2016 live stream. Philando Castile sat in his car, buckled in, bleeding, dying. "Why did you shoot him, sir?" asked his fiancée, Diamond Reynolds, pain piercing her every word. Castile, who had been pulled over in a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota, because his quote, wide-set nose, end quote, supposedly resembled that of a robbery suspect, had been reaching for his ID, but in order to avoid any surprises, let the police officer know he had a gun with him, a legally permitted, right-to-carry concealed gun. That was all the cop needed to know. Officer Geronimo Yanez began shooting. Castile's death came just one day after Alton Sterling's down in Louisiana. He, too, was carrying a gun, which was not unusual in this right-to-carry state. Granted, Sterling had a felony conviction, so owning a firearm was, for him, illegal, but he had been robbed before and wanted protection. On July 5th, 2016, the Baton Rouge police received a 911 call that there was a man with a weapon threatening customers at a local convenience store. As officers rolled onto the scene, they saw Sterling sitting there selling CDs and DVDs, just as the store owner allowed him to do and indeed welcomed. The threatening man was not Sterling. In fact, there was no threatening man. It had been a prank call, but that didn't matter. Within a few minutes, police had thrown the black man down, pinned him to the asphalt, and then started yelling that Sterling had a gun. He did. It was in his pocket where he could hardly reach it, what with the officers squatting on both his legs and one arm. Nevertheless, the police began firing round after round into his prone body, point blank. Blood poured out of his chest, but not for long. Alton Sterling was dead. The back-to-back deaths of these two black men police had shot for carrying guns should have jolted into action the Second Amendment's staunchest advocate, the National Rifle Association. In 1995, for example, the organization's denunciations flew fast and furious when it contended that law enforcement not only overreacted, but went out of its way to kill gun owners. Angered by the deaths at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, and the siege and firefight at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, both of which were sparked by federal agents serving warrants for weapons violations, Wayne LaPierre, the NRA's executive vice president, angrily wrote, quote, "If you have a badge, you have the government's go-ahead to harass, intimidate, and even murder law-abiding citizens," end quote. He further denounced cops as, quote, "jackbooted government thugs who have more power to take away our constitutional rights, break in our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure or kill us." Nearly 2 decades later, that sentiment had not changed. This was evident when Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy, who had refused to pay over $1 million in fees for grazing his cattle on public land, summoned his gun-toting, self-styled militiamen to do battle with federal authorities to prevent the seizure of his herd for restitution. Richard Mack, a former recipient of the NRA's Law Enforcement Officer of the Year award, asserted, "If federal agents are going to start killing people, I'm sorry, but to show the world how ruthless these people are, women and children need to be placed in the front lines as human shields." Mack didn't flinch as he insisted, quote, "Women need to be the first ones shot. I would have put my own wife or daughter there on the front lines, and I would have been a screaming bloody murder to watch them die," end quote. Larry Pratt, a speaker at the NRA's 2014 National Convention, commenting on the fact that Bundy, quote, "backed them," the Bureau of Land Management agents, down with automatic rifles and other deadly weaponry, proudly called that armed confrontation, quote, "a proper, legitimate, lawful response to illegitimate, unlawful exercise of government power, particularly on the federal level," end quote. Yet how quickly the NRA's swagger disappeared when government agents gunned down Philando Castile and Alton Sterling for merely carrying guns. Sterling's death didn't even merit acknowledgement. As for Castile, the NRA broke its silence only after inordinate pressure from African-American members led the gun manufacturers' lobby to issue a tepid statement that the Second Amendment was applicable, quote, "regardless of race, religion, or sexual orientation." When pressed further by many of its members to stand up for Castile, the often fierce organization demurred, saying it was, quote, "important for the NRA not to comment while the investigation is ongoing." This situational silence did not go unnoticed. The NRA had not only loudly defended the rights of those at the Branch Davidian cult and at Ruby Ridge, men who had actually shot and killed members of law enforcement, but the organization had also doubled down on calling for more guns in the face of mass shootings in a public school in Newtown, Connecticut, and a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Yet here, the guardian of the Second Amendment was now deliberately ignoring the inconvenient fact that black men had been killed for merely possessing a firearm. "Where's the NRA?" asked journalist Hannah Kozlowska. "Didn't Sterling and Philando Castile have Second Amendment rights too?" David Graham in The Atlantic coolly observed that, quote, "two shootings give a strong sense that the Second Amendment does not apply to black Americans the same way it does to white Americans," end quote. Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson wrote that he saw the old Jim Crow whites only sign plastered above the Second Amendment. The book, The Second, by Carol Anderson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. The Center for Health and Democracy is reporting some huge swings in the revenue and profit numbers coming out of the big for-profit health insurance companies in America. Back in 2012, for example, United Health Group received, where'd it go? 56%, I'm sorry, this is Anthem. 56% of their company's revenues came from private paying customers. Today, it's only 27%. What's making up the difference? Well, it looks like it's these Medicare Advantage scam programs. Same thing with United Healthcare. In fact, United Healthcare has 35,000 fewer people in their individual and employee-sponsored plans today than they did in 2012, 10 years ago. But they have had 100% growth in their enrollment. What is it? Medicare Advantage scam. Susan Rogers, Dr. Susan Rogers, MD, a general internist and president of physicians for the National Health Program. PNHP.org is the website. PNHP on Twitter, or RGRSSSN is Dr. Susan Rogers' Twitter handle, is on the line with us. Dr. Rogers, welcome to the program. Tell us how we're doing here in this country right now with these attempts, particularly by Democrats in the House and Senate, to at least slow down this freight train that George W. Bush started when he popularized the privatization of Medicare, with the Medicare reforms in, what was it, 2003, 2005, whatever year it was, with this allowing them to use the term Medicare Advantage to describe just, a basic private health insurance program.
Well, things have clearly gotten worse, and they are continuing to get worse. And part of it is this belief that healthcare is a market and it is better served by private businesses versus the government. And that's entirely wrong. Healthcare is not a market. It doesn't function the way other markets do with other goods. It should be looked at as a public good and not being, delivered through private corporations that have a totally different mission, which is to make money. And they clearly are doing very well with their mission.
Is that because if I'm going out to buy a pair of jeans or a new sofa or, have dinner with my wife at a restaurant, these are all choices. Whereas when I go to the doctor, it may well have to do with life or death, and I really don't have any choice. I have to deal with this or I die.
Exactly. And then, when we think about choice in healthcare, what is it that we really want to choose? We want to be able to choose our doctor, who we go see for our healthcare. We want to choose where we go for our healthcare, whether it's at a certain clinic or a hospital. Those are the choices, not a healthcare plan that we want. And you're right, when you are critically ill, you're sick, you need to go to the emergency room, you're not in a position to make choices. And even if you do have time to make a choice, let's say you need to have your gallbladder out, for example, and even if you call different hospitals to say how much does it cost, none of that is really accurate. And your eventual bill will probably be nothing like what they may propose, because right now it's based on what your insurance will pay, not what the hospital charges.
So back during the Trump administration, they rolled out this new, the Centers for Medicare Services, CMS, rolled out this new program to allow doctors and hospitals to shift people into Medicare Advantage programs. In some cases, even without their knowing or without their permission. Some of them are opt-out rather than opt-in. And that the direct contracting entities, the DCEs, and DCEs kind of went viral for a while there, starting maybe 6 months ago. And now it appears that the industry is coming up with new ways that people can get shifted into Medicare Advantage and out of traditional Medicare without their knowledge or consent.
Clearly, yes. And Medicare Advantage is a little bit different from the direct contracting entity because you can choose to go into a Medicare Advantage plan versus, or you choose to go into traditional Medicare. But the direct contract entity can align you into a plan based on your physician. Whoever your provider is, if they're a member of a DCE, they will align you with that doctor, and you will then be enrolled in the DCE. You don't even know it. You did not make that choice. So the DCEs are managed plans, and they're similar to how they function to Medicare Advantage, but I like to describe it as Medicare Advantage on performance-enhancing drugs. They just are much more virulent in the terms of their aggressiveness in trying to make money, and the fact that you're enrolled and you don't even know it, which is really contrary to the choice that you have made. I personally have made a choice to be in traditional Medicare. I hope I'm not in a direct contracting entity now, but I could be placed in one and I wouldn't even know.
That's amazing. And you're a physician. We're talking with Dr. Susan Rogers, MD. And so what is the state of attempts to push back on this? I'm frankly shocked and disappointed that the Biden administration hasn't taken some pretty aggressive steps to do something about this. Although I get it. These health insurance companies are multi-billion-dollar companies. This is a trillion-dollar marketplace. And, buying a politician these days is just, it's an investment of $2 or $3 million to really, really and truly own a politician. And if you're looking at $1 billion in profit, $2 million to buy off Ted Cruz or something is nothing. But I'm still disappointed that the Biden administration has not taken a more direct action against these people. Who is pushing back on this, and how is it going?
Well, Physicians for National Health Program is definitely pushing back. In fact, we made a trip. There was a group of us, all physicians, one medical student who joined us too. We went to Washington, D.C., and we had a rally in front of the HHS building, and we presented a petition with over 250 signatures saying that we did not agree with the direct contracting entities that they proposed. And keep in mind, this was done by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation that was started. It was created under the Affordable Care Act, actually back in the Obama administration. And the way it was created, there was not any mandatory oversight. They can do whatever they want. Congress doesn't. When we talked to some Congress people, they were not even aware of this. And so all of this is done without any oversight, without any regulation. I mean, that's how it has to be if they can just sneak people into a program that they didn't choose.
Right. What is ACO REACH?
Well, ACO is Affordable Care Organizations, which are just groups of healthcare providers that are part of the managed care system where those providers and their patients are managed care. And the REACH is, God, I'm blanking on the eponym, but it's about equity and access. And it's just really a new name to the DCE program. It's just the same shirt, but a different color.
Yeah, so this was because everybody was getting all upset about DCEs, they just changed the name.
Exactly, that's all they did, and they made it a little bit more aggressive and predatory, but it's the same system.
Do you expect anything to change? I mean, have the Democrats broadly, if we could talk about the politics of this for just a moment here, and then I see a break coming up, so, is there a broad movement within the Democratic Party to do something about it? I know we've got some politicians. I've got, Kurt Schrader here in Oregon, who's basically owned by the health industry, not wanting to do anything about this. He's a Democrat. But broadly, is the Democratic Party on board with doing something about this?
Unfortunately, no. And I think a lot of this is just related to how much influence lobbyists have and where campaign donations come from. But what we have done, though, is we have, talked to Congress people, and many of them have actually thought about it, and once they've learned about it, changed the way they think. But we've done some things that have been very successful. In Seattle, the Puget Sound Seniors Association, they had the city council pass a resolution against the DCEs. The Arizona Medical Society passed a solution against the DCE and the ACO REACH program. So there are social activist groups, including PNHP, that are working with areas, city councils, Congress people, medical societies, so that they are aware and they are becoming more active against this program. So it's beyond just providers. It's part of the social activism in this country.
Beyond just going to pnhp.org, which I strongly encourage people to do and chip in and support the extraordinary work you folks are doing and have been doing for years.
Thank you.
I keynoted your Seattle conference 15 years ago, I think it was. I have great affection for PNHP. But beyond that, what should people say when they call their member of Congress, and how can people most directly, people who are concerned about this and the future of Medicare itself, because it seems to me that they're at about 50% now privatized Medicare. When they hit 60 or 70%, they're just going to say, okay, that's it, screw it, we're going to pull the plug, no more Medicare, and that could happen in the next 2 or 3 years.
It's quite frightening.
I don't want to see that happen. What can the average person do?
Okay, let me give you a couple of websites that you can go to. One is protectmedicare.net/register, and then you can get to our website, and you can also sign on to our petition.
Okay.
There's another site, protectmedicare.net/May 9th, which will be a roundtable discussion with 3 expert physicians who will talk about how this new program will not address equity, and also talk more about the risk of the ACO REACH program. And on May 23rd, PNHP is sponsoring a workshop which will teach you and give you a toolkit of how you can become more active and knowledgeable in fighting the ACO REACH program.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Susan Rogers, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for asking me.
My pleasure. And pnhp.org as well, and PNHP on Twitter. It's 18 minutes past the hour. Back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Should America prepare for war if Russia uses biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons? Adam Kinzinger, the Republican, is saying yes. And I got an amazing geeky science for you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So stick around. We'll be right back. A lot more to talk about. And welcome back. Paul in Benton, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom? It's kind of ironic because I just got back from Home Depot, and there was only one other person in the whole store with a mask on.
Yeah,
and I had to go to Lowe's, and I saw 2 people in that store with a mask on. So, they're, they just basically, given up on the COVID thing.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to mention was, you were talking about 30% of these people, in our society are racist. But, you add in the xenophobes and you add in, the misogynists and everything. And, we got, 50%, 50% of this country is basically, off the rails. And I think a lot of them suffer from this, paraphrenic disorder. These organized, systematic, methodical delusions. They have a warped sense of history, that, basically no sense of history. And you try and explain something to them, and they'll just tell you that you're wrong. And the funny thing, the scary thing is 3% of all the small arms, are in 3% of the population of all the small arms in this country. It's with 3% of the population. That's scary. That's an army.
Okay. Your numbers don't make any sense to me, Paul. You mean 3% of the population has the majority of the weapons. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it, and I think that this is real, and it's running as you say, rampant in rural areas, and this is a real problem. And it's 73% of Americans are white, and I think it's 50% of the white population is into this stuff. Sean in Stamford, Connecticut. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. How's it going?
Good.
Okay. Well, my thing is, you mentioned the abortion thing earlier, and the 30% of the population, being racist. Well, to me, the thing with the abortion bit is that it's not about abortion itself. It's more about overturning legal precedent, where it's not just the abortion, it's overturning the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and especially Brown versus Board of Education, which is one I know the right wingers absolutely can't
The
stand.
Supreme Court has already taken a bite out of every single one of those decisions.
Right, but it's only a matter of time until they're overturned completely, and that's the real concerning part.
Yeah, I get it. It's the structure at law that we put in place in the 1960s to try to create a pluralistic society, a multiracial society, an egalitarian society. And it's not just your random Republicans. You've got some very, very powerful, very, very wealthy right-wingers who have created think tanks, who have created state party policy groups, who have basically created a shadow political party that's larger than the Republican and more well-funded than the Republican Party. And they are driving legislation. They're driving these efforts. They're driving these so-called, model legislation. I mean, it's crazy. Sean, thanks.
I know it is.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the call. Your point is well taken. It's 22 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Have you noticed that people are basically imitating Donald Trump all over the country? We're seeing all this rude behavior, sexist, racist behavior. People getting arrested at airport gates, airplanes being turned around because people are fighting with flight attendants, disorderly, rude, unhinged conduct. I mean, it's just gone nuts. Car crashes are up, gun deaths are up, shootings are up. Healthcare workers are being literally physically assaulted in some hospitals. They're having to put together panic buttons. This kind of behavior in our schools is increasing. It looks like, according to some sociologists, psychologists, and even business consultants, it looks like a lot of this ties back not just to the Trump presidency, with Donald Trump providing us with an example of how to be, an obnoxious person, but also the crisis of the pandemic. We've got a deeper dive into this topic over at ThomHartmann.com. There's a great video about it. You can check it out there. And welcome back. So Adam Kinzinger, the Republican from, I believe, Illinois, who is not running for re-election. He's been redistricted out of a district, but he's not running because the Republican Party has disowned him because he and Marjorie Taylor, he and Liz Cheney had the audacity to join the January 6th committee. But he's still a member of Congress until the first week of January of next year. And he has introduced on Sunday a measure into the U.S. House that would give congressional authorization for President Joe Biden to intervene militarily in Ukraine if Russia uses biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons. Now, President Biden has said that these are red lines for him. You will recall that President Obama talked about red lines similar to this with regard to Syria. And when Russia ignored those red lines, President Obama did nothing. I'm not sure that he had the authority to do anything. Well, this Representative Kinzinger is saying, let's give him the authority in advance. Now, I am generally opposed to authorizations to use military force. I would much rather see actual declarations of war if you're going to go to war. But if this is the United States involving itself inside Ukraine purely defensively against an outsider, I think that's a different thing, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to identify it or the best way to flag it or whatever. He said in a statement, and I quote, "Putin must be stopped, and President Biden, the commander-in-chief to the world's greatest military, should have the authority and means to take the necessary actions to do so." Now, the question is, how do you best do that? Nancy Pelosi, by the way, was, famously over the weekend in Kyiv, in Ukraine, and speaking about how, she said this war must end. And she's, very straightforward about this. And by the way, part of that delegation was Barbara Lee. Barbara Lee was the one vote against the war in Afghanistan and who also voted against the war in Iraq and has referred to AUMFs as ill-defined and open-ended, specifically the one in response to 9/11. I'm real interested to hear what Barbara Lee has to say about this. And I think that this is going to be a really fascinating debate in the House of Representatives. If it gets into committee, if it gets out of committee, keep an eye on this. Adam Kinzinger, how do we do this? What do we do if Russia drops a nuke on Kyiv? How do we respond?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your questions or your comments right after this. It's 27 minutes past the hour. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms
that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero-emission by 2040, and said, okay, what will happen if we do this? They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable, the American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. I've got, this is just an amazing geeky science. You know, one of the major contributors to global warming, I mean, like major, like in the top 5, I believe, is our consumption of meat. around the world. And a lot of it has to do with factory farms and the way meat is grown, producing methane and destroying, land that can be carbon sinks. But also a lot of it has to do with this is, the principal driver of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest as well, which Jair Bolsonaro is just doing as enthusiastically and as fast as he can. So here comes a tick. This is from the Washington Post, so it's very D.C.-centric. They're talking about, what's happening in the D.C. area. And this tick is called the Lone Star tick, and it had never been in the Northeast before, but because of global warming, it's moving north out of Texas and out of the South. And it is now becoming endemic in the D.C. area, this Lone Star tick. And one bite from this tick can make you allergic to meat for the rest of your life. And I mean seriously allergic. It turns out that there is this sugar. The disease you get is called the alpha-gal syndrome, or alpha-GAL syndrome. And it turns out there's a sugar called alpha-GAL in meat that the tick gets when it sucks on a mouse or a deer or any other animal. And then when it bites you, it spits that into you along with its saliva, which acts like a vaccine. And your body goes, holy cow, look at this sugar. It's in my bloodstream. It's not supposed to be here. And it starts producing antibodies to that sugar that's only in meat. And now, guess what? When you eat meat, your body goes, oh, that's the stuff I was immunized against. And you get headaches and swollen, shortness of breath and hives and itching and a rash and swelling all across your body and abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomiting from getting a tick bite and eating meat. So, maybe this is a solution to global warming. Hey, come on over. We got the ticks are great. Let's go sit in the backfield. I don't know. Anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls. One of the people on Twitter, by the way, in response to my, what do you do when people ask you why you're wearing a mask? He said he puts red dots on his mask, looking like little blood drops, and coughs a lot. And people don't even get close enough to ask. Ruth in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Hey, Ruth, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I'm responding to that question that you said, what do you say when people ask, why are you still wearing a mask? And this one wasn't my idea. I heard it on public radio, but I have part of it that I'm going to add. They said that there was a survey that said, oh, people look more attractive when they wear a mask. And that was when Gorsuch was not wearing a mask for Sotomayor. And then I would say, if somebody asked me that, oh, people look more attractive when they wear a mask, and then I would say, you should try it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, a good one. A good one. Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. David in Boston, you got an idea?
Yes. Hi, Tom. Yes, my question was with reference to the mask. Just as the intermission goes along for your commercials, that these people are getting more testier. They're getting, they're bringing this Hawthorne. They're bringing weapons, armed or loaded weapons onto the airplane with a mask. Don't be fooled. I'm actually an immigrant. I wasn't born here, but I grew up here in Boston, and studying the English language was very primary for me, so that people wouldn't look at me funny, because I look Latino. I'm very Latino from Costa Rica, but as a photojournalist, I also got blackballed through the Boston police for a certain situation. So the question comes to what I asked my wife, well, because you were talking to this topic, and she said, well, I would say I have the coronavirus. And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe that would work for you. You're a female and you're white, Latina, but I am a Latino male, a little darker. I look different. And the thing is, with those people that become more dangerous, what if they're looking for, an excuse or to get on TV like Carl Rittenhouse? What if they have a knife? What if they have a gun? Working in Boston as a photojournalist, I have to be. So
your response would be, I'm trying to avoid the white racist killers?
Yes. What I would do is, as I always did, growing up as a kid, being beat up by the Caucasian gangs of Jamaica Plain in Boston, I would go to the other side. I would run away. to avoid the whole situation because I know what's coming next.
Right.
I was beaten up, and you can see it in their eyes, just like the police when they want to be heroes. They have this.
So with a mask, you feel
eye.
a little safer. I mean, this is kind of a serious conversation now.
No. What I meant is, for me, is I would keep my mask on. I'm going to move to the other side of the street because these people are looking to be heroes. Who knows what their intention is? Like the commercial break says, they're becoming more and more dangerous, more and more.
No, I get it. I get it, David. But it inspires a thought, of stepping off that, trying to go back to being funny, which would be, actually, I'm an escaped criminal hiding out from the police. Or I'm a terrorist trying to make my way to Wall Street or something. I mean, these are things that would probably get you in more trouble than it's worth. But
exactly, and this way, to avoid the problem, for me, I've got too much to lose. This family, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying. Just to be perhaps if you were a Caucasian person, blonde, blue-eyed, you can respond with something funny and it'll be taken lightly.
Right.
But with someone who is, in black or Latino, as myself, it doesn't really work that way when they're trying to be heroes.
I get it. It's almost a white privilege. It's an opportunity.
Exactly.
David, thank you. Thank you very much for that. A nice reality check. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's up?
Well, Mr. Hartmann, I wanted to maybe, you asked a profound question, and I'm sure you're not surprised that I wanted to respond to it with regard to the country getting on less than whatever percentage it is of white supremacist idiots. And so, sans emotion, I just want to kind of ask you or present something from a cerebral and linguistic standpoint about this whole issue, because first of all, the beginning of wisdom starts with the definition of terms, Tom. And when we talk about racism, when we talk about white supremacy, how is it being defined? Does everyone in that discussion understand it the same way?
Well, clearly not.
And is it the same to you? I don't mean you personally. I'm speaking rhetorically. Is it the same to you that it is to me? Mm-hmm. For instance, when I hear the term white supremacy, it's white supremacy to me to not be specific about the peculiarities that exist for me as a black man or my daughters as black women. For instance, this country will not specifically address us. The Civil Rights Act, and you know this as well as I do, was passed because of issues involving black people. Not anybody else, really, but now it's become homogenized, and it includes all kinds of things. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The Civil War was fought because of basically an issue with black people, the slaves. But it's not, and what I'm trying to say to you, and maybe your listeners will understand, it all depends on who you are. And you can't have a discussion before you define things. When I hear about affirmative action had, less to do with Asian Americans, less to do with even Native Americans. And by the way, my maternal grandmother was a Cherokee Indian. But I'm identified as black, and proudly so. But when I hear affirmative action, everyone knows that that's those black people, equal rights, black people, and yet none of these things specifically address us. And I think that's intellectually dishonest. So white supremacy to me is that nebulous. It's in the language.
Okay. There is a distinct, we've had this conversation before, not just you and me, but more generally, more globally, about the difference between racism and racism. The racism that is acted on versus racism that is merely thought. Racism where a person has the power to enforce it versus racism where a person doesn't have that power. And I think, with regard to white supremacy, you've got the same thing. Although white supremacy is I think even a little more invidious. It is a belief that white people are superior. And this is, Tucker Carlson in one of the quotes that is in my article today, he comes right out and he says, we have to respect biology, or words to that effect. In other words, this is science. And I think that's widely held, and particularly in the white community, but not just in the white community. I think that's widely held, right across the board. And, books like The Bell Curve didn't help any. And although the pushback to it, I think, has. But this whole idea of any one race being uniquely superior to other races it just needs to be blown up. It just needs to be blown up. And I think it's time to stop accommodating these people and thinking that we can convert them or win them over. It's time to just evict them from civil society. Your thoughts?
Well, I can tell you that you had a great caller called from Costa Rica, and he used the term that he was blackballed. I'll leave it at that.
There you go. Okay, Kenyatta, thanks a lot. I doubt that had anything to do with Tucker Carlson's new special.
To Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Although I don't know. If you tan your balls enough, I guess they get dark. We'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Patrick in Los Angeles, or West Los Angeles. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Hope you're doing well. Great topics. Racism and then healthcare. Those things tend to merge sometimes, oftentimes, depending on where you live. Now, the thing about not being taught history, or history not being taught, the Confederacy doesn't want history taught because they don't want to be held responsible. That is the thing about it. If you were to look at Germany, for instance, after World War II, the entire population was forced to confront precisely what happened, and the horrors of what happened are what influenced people to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah,
there's never been any request for forgiveness. There's never been any feeling of guilt on the part, maybe for some people, but by and large, the South was allowed to go unchecked.
Beyond that, the South was allowed to continue promoting their lost cause and putting up statues and teaching their BS. I've told the story 100 times, but very quickly, when Louise and I moved to Atlanta in the 1980s, our son was 7 or 8 years old. He went off to school. He came home one day. I said, "What'd you learn today?" And he said, "Oh, today we were studying about the War of Northern Aggression."
Right.
I mean,
the war.
This is a public school.
Fiction, a piece of fiction, a distortion of history. And if I can mention one other thing, different topic, but with regard to healthcare, when you look at it, you can take two opposing sides. The entire system of insurance is a socialized system. Pooling your assets together for insurance is socialized medicine.
I'm listening.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, everybody's dollars together, that is socialized medicine. But on the other hand, if you were to break it down and categorize healthcare, there is for-profit healthcare and there's not-for-profit healthcare. So, honestly, Democrats should never, ever, ever, ever be talking about healthcare as socialized medicine. They should be talking about it as for-profit and not-for-profit.
Well,
Medicare is not-for-profit.
The for-profit, not-for-profit is an important distinction. And in fact, even with Medicare Advantage, whenever anybody comes in to defend a Medicare Advantage plan, it's always a Kaiser plan, which is nonprofit. But I think that socialized implies government involvement and or government ownership. So I would be reluctant to adopt your prescription here, Patrick.
Well, keep on thinking about it. Kaiser is most certainly a for-profit company. Medicare is,
How so? They're incorporated as a nonprofit. They don't have shareholders. They don't distribute profits to anybody. I get it that they want to try and maximize revenue, but it's a somewhat different dynamic.
Not entirely. I mean, their physicians are essentially, they are essentially members. I mean, they are incentivized and they make more dollars off of prescribing fewer branded prescriptions. Ordering fewer tests, that type of thing. Also, municipalities, if they are self-insured, they're running their own nonprofit organizations. These are all, everything else is a for-profit system. Every single other plan.
I get it. Patrick, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It's 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back with more of this program, the place where smart people get the news, right after this. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Remember Paul Manafort? He used to be business partners with Roger Stone back in the day, working for Republican politicians like, Nixon and Reagan. Well, in 2004, he took a really sweet gig over in Ukraine, helping the Russians, President Putin, install Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine, a nice Putin puppet. That same year, though, the people of Ukraine said enough, and basically Yanukovych got driven out of the country. So they tried it again in 2010. Let's bring, this Putin puppet back into Ukraine, Yanukovych. And it worked until 2014 when they got kicked out. So he gets kicked out of Ukraine, Manafort. So what does he do the next year, 2015? He decides to run the Trump campaign. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Yeah, could be. Okay, there's an entire video that outlines this whole timeline over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back, 52 minutes past the hour. Ben in Chicago. Hey, Ben, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Kenyatta always goes so deep that I feel like I need a joint after I listen to him, and I don't even smoke. Okay. But I mean that in the best way.
Yeah.
Anyways, in reference to the mask thing, I actually had someone ask me that question, and I simply looked at them and said, to protect myself from entitlement. And she didn't know quite how to take that.
She probably didn't understand what the word entitlement meant.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was my response.
Okay, that's a good one. So far, my favorite is to get a little red pen and put little red spots on your mask and cough a lot. Nobody will ask you anything, right? Carrie in New Windsor, New York. Hey, Carrie, what's on your mind today?
I love the mask decoration idea.
Yeah.
That's classic. So you had mentioned something I just turned on your show when you were talking about the ticks in the meat. Did you just find that out?
Yeah, I read it in Science last week.
Okay, yeah, it's been a thing for a while now. So
has it been? Okay, it's new to me.
Yeah, it's really something. So because this is an area that I live where it's like Tickville, USA. So that's all. So luckily, thank goodness, you're in Oregon and you're not in Tickville, USA. So, but today is Meat-Free Monday, and every Monday is Meat-Free Monday.
Declared by whom?
So I figured,
Declared by who?
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, but it's Meatless Monday. All right. I've seen the phrase before, so it's
everybody who wants to try to be a vegetarian. You can just give up meat once a week on a Monday, give it a try, and maybe help save global warming, like you said. I agree with you with that. And a good way to do that is to watch a video every time you're thinking about eating meat called Meet Your Meat, because if you have the balls to eat meat, then, of course, you have the balls to watch an 8-minute video about it before you do. Also, there's a movie called Cowspiracy where they talk about some really great statistics of how much the factory farm industry contributes to the methane and pollution on our planet.
Yeah, I get it. So, I'm with you. And if we all and what you'll find if you go Meatless Monday is that you feel a little better, and so maybe it's Meatless Tuesday too, and then eventually you get to where it's meatless pretty much every day, and you're feeling a whole lot better.
Yeah, it's actually meat-free Monday because I don't believe that the animals are necessarily less than us.
Okay.
So it's kind
All
of a
right.
karmic thing too,
We're
right?
we're
Maybe a
splitting
little
hairs,
bit
but
of
I get
karmic.
it. I get it. And free is a nice word. I'm with you, Carrie.
It's a must-free.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you very much. Denise in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Good to talk to you again. I was told by somebody I know that works in a transplant unit, far away from me, of course, the waiting list for hearts and lungs for the people that had COVID that were not vaccinated is extremely huge. And the transplant unit she works on is filled with people between 20 and 50 who were not vaccinated, had COVID, and now their lungs and their hearts need to be transplanted or they will die.
Wow.
And there's waiting lists outside. I don't know who's monitoring it, who's talking about it, but she said it's just awful.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a story.
Yeah, they need lungs, they need hearts, they're, livers, but mostly lungs and hearts in this particular transplant unit.
Denise, can you flag me somehow on that on Twitter, and I'll follow you so that you can direct message me, and you can perhaps put me in touch with your friend. That might make the basis for a fascinating article.
I could find out how to get in touch with her, and then that would be a good thing.
Yeah, because it's the sort of thing that I think needs to get. This is. I mean, there are millions of Americans who are now disabled from having had COVID. And I think this is one of the things that's contributing to the low unemployment numbers, frankly, and the lower workplace participation numbers. And it's like this invisible thing. Nobody talks about it. So
exactly.
Yeah, Denise, thank you very much. Thanks for the information. I appreciate it. We'll be back. We're going to talk with Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding. Speaking of COVID, we're going to talk with Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding on the other side of this break about what's going on with COVID. Is there a silent epidemic we don't even know about? And what about this BA4 and BA5 variants that are now whacking South Africa?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Brian J. Karam. It's titled Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It. This is from the very last chapter, page 265. My father once told me that if you have a complaint, then you'd better have a solution. People bitch about everything, he routinely told me. They seem to like it more than solving problems. I've often thought about that as I spent a career covering the news. It is increasingly popular to merely ignore those things with which we don't agree and treat people the same way. That's hardly a solution. It only creates more problems. My pop also preached to me about adaptability, as did Alan, and that is a lesson I've tried to apply to every part of my life, to adapt. By the time Alan was preaching the same thing, it was a lesson I'd already learned, though it's still much appreciated. Today, the changing media landscape calls for adherence to some of our strictest tenets, while at the same time adapting to how we deliver the news to the public. Our democracy demands it. The local paper is perilously close to completely disappearing. Large swaths of this country live in news deserts. According to a study published by Axios in June 2021, the United States has lost some 37,000 newsroom jobs since 2016. And according to a study released on May 1st, 2021, by the University of North Carolina School of Media and Journalism, more than 1,300 communities across the United States have lost all news coverage. Among the findings in the study, about 20% of all metro and community newspapers in the United States, about 1,800, have gone out of business or merged since 2004, when about 9,000 were being published. Hundreds of more have scaled back coverage so much that they're becoming what researchers call ghost newspapers. Almost all of the newspapers still publishing have also scaled back, just less drastically. Online news sites, as well as some TV newsrooms and cable access channels, are working hard to keep local reporting alive, but these are not taking root. These are taking root more slowly than newspapers are dying. Hence the 1,300 communities that have lost all local coverage. To adapt to this undeniable fact, we have to make newspapers more viable and easier to sustain. We cannot afford to let newsrooms disappear because they play a vital role in delivering information that the internet cannot reproduce. When you go to the internet, you're usually on a hard target searching for information. When you pick up a newspaper, you're scanning for information and are open to read anything presented to you. You may not know what to search for, but you know what you want to read when you find it. Newspapers are smorgasbords of information. The internet isn't and cannot be set up that way. So how do we save newspapers? There are a variety of business models currently under consideration. Nonprofits hold promise, but as of yet, we haven't gotten the needed solution or the needed traction. A big push was made to save the Baltimore Sun through a nonprofit, and this may indeed be the best way to save newspapers, since the job they do for society is completely incompatible with capitalism. Quote, "There's no question about it. I don't think any problem facing the country is more severe than what is facing our news information infrastructure," end quote, Michael Copps, formerly of the Federal Communications Commission, told me. Quote, "I saw it. First call I got was from the chairman when I joined the FCC was about the merger of Fox and Chris Kraft. That set the tone. I was going to the FCC. I thought going to the FCC was the coolest job on earth. We'd be serving the public. And then I realized I spent a lot of time meeting with CEOs who wanted to seek approval of their mergers. The FCC more often than not approved the mergers. Then a rival would come in and gripe and say in order to compete, they had to have a merger too," end quote. The free market obviously isn't the answer. It only allows politics and information today to be played and reported on as sport. Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather, and others saw it coming. This is a very steep mountain to climb, and there is no commercial solution to the problem. The corporate consolidation, as Copps told me, is too embedded in the system. How do you get beyond that? The government has to exercise its antitrust laws, and we need to think about public media. Put the brakes on corporate mergers. Subsidies are the key, Victor Picard, the University of Pennsylvania communications professor, explained to me. He works at the intersections of U.S. and global media activities and politics, the history and political economy of media institutions, and the normative foundations of media policy. Quote, "It's the commercialization, the dedication to clickbait, and profits above all else. That's what's driving this. There's no commercial incentive to do it right. Journalism often isn't sexy," end quote, he said. While there isn't one perfect model, Picard said he could see subsidized subscribers or a voucher plan. Everybody gets a $100 voucher and they can buy media of their choice. It guarantees a certain method of support. Subsidize the news outlets themselves. My preference is to radically expand and reform our public broadcast system so that they can actually be politically independent, end quote. Pickard also supports public media centers in every city across the country, public libraries, schools, and journalism schools. That's my radical plan. It's healthy to have a mixed system. Independents, nonprofits, public benefit corporations, and standards for for-profit companies. The driving force today in journalism is capitalism, and it's driving our journalism into the ground. The book is Free the Press, The Death of American Journalism and How to Revive It.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. I just saw a note from Sue Nethercutt on Twitter that 10% of the people on the transplant list for new lungs are there because of COVID. This is serious stuff. And so what's the state of the pandemic or epidemic or whatever we're calling it these days? On the line with us is Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, the epidemiologist and senior fellow for the American Federation of American Scientists. He's the first whistleblower of the COVID pandemic, former faculty member and researcher at the Harvard Medical School and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. His website is fas.org, or actually the best way to follow him is to go to Twitter and get at Dr. Eric Ding, D-R-E-R-I-C-D-I-N-G. Dr. Feigl-Ding, welcome back to the program. I understand that since the last time we talked, the plague got you. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, that was three and a half weeks ago. I tried to do the best I could, but my kid brought it home from school, and by the time we realized he was positive, it was too late. Yeah. I was positive the next day.
Yeah. Was it the Omicron? It didn't whack your lungs too bad, and you're okay?
Well, we didn't know the exact variant, but I suspect it was probably BA2.
Yeah.
I didn't get the first Omicron in the first wave.
Yeah.
And I think, I had fever and chills for like 2-3 days, but luckily I had Paxlovid, although that was quite an ordeal to try to get it. And then I felt better for a few days, and then I had a lingering cough again coming back, and I've had the lingering cough ever since.
Oh, geez. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you get better. I'm reading that there's two new variants, BA4 and BA5, that are running like crazy through South Africa and are apparently more contagious than BA2 or the variants of BA2. Yeah. Is this a concern for us outside of the unvaccinated community in the United States?
Oh, I think it is a concern because one of the studies for BA4 and 5 shows that even if you had the original Omicron, we're not talking about original Wuhan, that was ancient history. If you had the original Omicron back in December or January, your protection against BA4 and 5 is incomplete. It's much weaker. So people always forget the protection you have from a previous infection, God forbid, and hope you survived, is that you have protection against that variant. You don't have full protection against future variants. And so this, assumption that, you can't get hit again is just not true because, we think the reinfection window is probably about 3 months after your previous infection, you're susceptible again. And we've seen this in the UK as well, that, their BA2 wave hit exactly 3 months after their BA1 peak. Now, BA4 and 5 are still mostly in South Africa, but they have been identified in North America as well. But the problem here is BA2 and its daughter variant, BA2121, is actually surging even faster. So it becomes right now a rat race of which variant is going to be worse. And that is a really bad situation to be in because we know there's so many fast and evasive. And evasive here I emphasize because now, in this stage of the pandemic in which most people have been infected or vaccinated, it's basically not the virus that sprints the fastest, but the virus that can pole vault the fastest over your existing immunity to previous COVID. And so I really, really emphasize people need to be vigilant.
Yeah, I totally get it. So are we in the middle of an invisible COVID wave? I was telling my audience a little earlier over the weekend I had to buy a circuit breaker, and I went to Home Depot, And, you know, there were a couple hundred people in the store, and myself and one elderly couple were the only ones wearing masks. It's like, hey, it's over here. And
this is a very false
one of the
narrative.
It's
places. Not over because, first of all, you know, even New York is admitting that cases are up 50% in 1 week, and we're not testing enough because testing officially, the problem is most home tests are not reported. Like even my test, I tried to report my positive test. I had no idea how to actually report my case.
And you're an epidemiologist.
I know, but there's no system through my health department to report the case unless I actually go and get a PCR test. But then I'm like, I'm not going to line up outside in the CVS when I know I'm positive to get that test and try to register. It was just not worth the public health risk. And so this is a horrible situation right now. We have testing, but it's silent. The wastewater is the best metric, and wastewater clearly shows a rise. Hospitalizations haven't risen yet in the U.S. as much, but they have risen a bit, and the fall has completely stopped. And England, we're always a couple weeks behind England, about a month or two, sometimes 2 months. But they had like a hospitalization peak that's actually surpassed their previous Omicron wave. And it's really, really worrisome that I do not want another Omicron wave because of these new variants.
So what do you say to folks who say, well, you know, I know a lot of people who got this and you know, they were sick for a week, but you get really sick for a week from the flu too. And, you know, it's everywhere. I can't avoid it. It's going to be inevitable. This is the new reality, and I'm not willing to put my life on hold anymore. I'm going to go to a restaurant this afternoon. Screw it.
Yeah, I think, you know, I can't tell everyone what to do, and that's not my job. But the issue, the reality epidemiology-wise, is that even if you're boosted, and even if you meet 10 people who are fully boosted, the issue is, although none of your bridges will collapse. Let's just pretend you as a body is like a 4-lane highway bridge. Although none of you will go to hospital or die, likely, the problem is that you're still carrying, you know, the transmission. You're still very likely carried. Even with 2 shots, with 3 shots, you only have like 45% efficacy against symptomatic transmission, even lower against asymptomatic. So you're still allowing the virus. You close 2 lanes out of 4 lanes of the highway. You're still carrying it to other people, and eventually, you know, we know that a more contagious virus that's less severe will kill more people than a more severe virus that's less contagious. We have a very, very contagious virus, and even if it's less severe, the fact that we allow it to spread unchecked is dangerous. And I remind people, 2 shots is not enough. Your protection against hospitalization and death is no longer 95, 99% with 2 shots. With 2 shots, your protection, according to England, against BA2 is only 59% lower risk. Now, this isn't like a 50-50 coin toss. It means like your risk is cut in half or more, but not the 95% number that you used to be used to when the results first came out in late 2020. So you need to get a booster and maybe another booster if you're highly immunocompromised and eligible.
So what do you, and obviously, you know, we want to carve out an exception here for people who are immunocompromised, people who are elderly, people who are in terrible health, people who have heart failure, things like that. You know, they probably just need to hide out for a while here. But how do you respond to this growing meme I'm seeing that, hey, I've got my shots, I got my booster, and now I'm going to get COVID because that's going to trigger a different part of my immune system, and it's going to fill, you know, it's going to completely fill out my immunity complement, and I will be more immune going forward. I hear the major rebuttal to that is that natural immunity, as you mentioned just a moment ago, only lasts 3 months. But does that mean that, you know, we're all going to be getting sick a couple of times a year when we do all get back to normal? Or I guess the larger question is, how and when do we get back to normal? Or is there no new normal?
Yeah, and I think a new normal, by the way, the word new normal is being abused. I think the issue is that we have to face a new reality. The new reality is that this virus is very, very contagious. is very evasive. It creates new variants very easily, especially when you infect millions or a billion people over the last few months. And if stopping transmission is more important than just saying, oh, you know what? We don't need to buckle our seatbelts. Hospital beds are not full. We don't need to, not drink
we've
and drive.
already lost, forgive the interruption, but I see a break coming here. We've already lost that battle. I mean, I can't get on an airplane now.
Yeah, the issue is not enough people are boosted. Oh, okay, if you're boosted, I'm going to basically say, yes, it becomes very difficult to control people and tell them what to do. Right. But if you're not 3-shot boosted, and I would say most of America is not 3-shot boosted, you have to be careful. And children, only 30% of children 5 to 11 are even vaccinated with 2 shots. And children under 5 are not. Right. So at very least, think of the children. And it's not just deaths, it's also long COVID as well. And you can get long COVID even without any hospitalization. 20, 30% unvaccinated, 10%, 5 to 10% of vaccinated people. And if you think about how many people have gotten infected, this is something we cannot allow our society to continue, because ultimately, for now, things might look rosy, but the long-term impact on our society on long COVID, the cost, the burden on the workforce, on families, it is just so morally bankrupt to keep letting this virus spread.
Yeah, so 3 months down the road, when the natural immunity from your COVID infection last week wanes, would you get on an airplane?
I would definitely wear an N95 mask. And this is what upsets me. Also, that two-way masking, if both the source, someone expelling aerosols, and the receiver wear masks, that's way better. Think about it. Like 95% and 95% together, the chance of you getting infected is much lower. So I would get on the airplane, but I would definitely wear an N95 mask. Don't listen to the guidelines about that, not wearing a mask on airplanes. Please wear a mask and turn on the overhead fan as much as you can, and try not to take off the mask if at all possible.
Yeah, it's a wild ride here. Last question: how do you see this going? Do you think that there's going to be some nasty variants coming down the road?
Yeah, I think the thing is, nasty variants, people think of nasty variants as like a deadly variant. But I would say that a nasty variant is an invasive variant that's going to reinfect you. And even if it's milder, a very reinfectious, highly invasive variant is ultimately what will kill more people. And that is what I worry about more than just like a highly deadly virus. So stop the transmission. That's the way we actually end COVID.
Yeah, no easy answers here. Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding, thank you so much for dropping by today. You can follow Dr. Feigl-Ding at Dr. Eric Ding, DRERICDING on Twitter. Thank you so much, sir.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour, back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Do you know Trump actually tried to order the Pentagon to shoot Black Lives Matter protesters? And welcome back. Let's see here. Anna in Tustin, California. Hey, Anna, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey.
Before I get into the lead of the story, just a quick update. I was the one who called about the Coalition for Ukraine.org website about boycotting companies that are still doing business with Russia. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to remind people, support Ukraine, give them money, back them that way. They're on the front line of our fight between democracy and autocracy. So we can't forget about them. And I noticed that, attention wanes, right? So, but the meat of the call is about giving up on white supremacists. And I totally get what you're saying. And I agree with you.
I'm not talking about giving up on them. I'm talking about pushing them aside, marginalizing them, and calling them out, identifying them, shaming them. Basically, politically and socially crapping on them, saying enough already, you guys get out of the way, we're going to get on with the business of this country.
I agree, I get it. I just wanted to put a name out there because this is somebody that I discovered through just YouTube algorithms, he came up, and I just went down the rabbit hole of looking at his YouTubes and learning about him. Mm-hmm. His name is Derek Black, and he's a scion of white supremacist royalty. You know, his grandfather started the Stormfront website, that whole thing. And so he, as a baby, his mind and his heart has been marinating and just steeped in white racist, white supremacist hate his entire life. And he went to college, and, you know, in college, you meet everybody, and he is who he is. But these kids didn't give up on him. And I agree with what you're saying. I'm just going in another direction here with just people and trying to plant seeds for the next generation. Exactly, one-on-one stuff that we have the power to do. And these kids invited him to dorm parties, house parties. They took him, called him, and he was just being his hateful self. And it took years, but it changed his heart and his mind to the point where he's writing books renouncing what he grew up with, and his family has disowned him. It's a remarkable story. You know, Oprah covered him, all that. Anyway, so I discovered him. I want to throw his name out there, Derek Black. Okay. And also, to bring that to the personal, I live in southern Orange County in a coastal town, and I have some pets with special dietary needs, and I've been going to a specialized pet store for over 10 years, for almost 20 years. And the proprietor of that store, the owner, this is pre-Trump because I don't give money to MAGA because it might end up in his war chest. So anyway, the whole 2004, I started shopping there, and I got a real white supremacist vibe. I can read the clues of tattoos, signs, stickers on cars. You know, I can read the clues. Mm-hmm. She's a white supremacist. I'm a person of color, and the atmosphere, she's happy to take my money, happy for me to shop there, but she's not very friendly. She's pretty ice cold. It took me years of small talk. It took me years of being just absolutely, Southern belle, aggressively sweet, making small talk, chit-chatting. We have a very warm, friendly, quasi, acquaintanceship, friendship. She's donated money to a charity fundraiser thing that I did with my fiancé at his company. So there's hope. And also,
so there's hope. That is remarkable. Are you a person of color, Anna?
I am, and so that's why I caught the heat, the ice-cold chilliness, the heat of her white supremacist hate. And it took years years. But there's a thaw with her. And there's another person who does my oil changes in my car.
I'm sorry, we're out of time, Anna.
He's a white supremacist. I'm working on him.
Okay, so good. Good luck.
One at a time.
Good luck. Thank you, Anna. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Back in 1981, the first year of the Reagan presidency, one of our two senators from Oregon here, Mark Hatfield, wrote an op-ed for the Oregon Territory newspaper about the new right, about this whole movement that had seized the Republican Party. And in it, he called them out for escalating nuclear arms, for opposing the Equal Rights Amendment, for opposing abortion, for supporting school prayer, and for their argument that if you weren't on their side, you were not patriotic. He also goes into a long rant about how they're exploiting religion for political purposes, and he thinks it's damaging Christianity as well as America. And then finally he says, finally, persistent threats of racism lie directly below the surface of new right ideology. And then he goes into this whole rant about that. It's really extraordinary how, what Reagan was doing is coming back into vogue. I got a whole video about the whole thing over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And we'll welcome back 24 minutes past the hour. And let's see here. I wanted to share this with you. Mark Esper, who was one of the several people that Donald Trump put in charge of the Pentagon, he fired him right after he lost the election because Esper was not excited about using the military. This is speculation, that Esper was not excited about or willing to use the military to overthrow the government, and replaced him with Chris Miller. So now former Defense Secretary Mark Esper has a new memoir coming out on the 10th of this month. And it's starting to leak out. And one of the things that just leaked out was Trump was talking to Esper about the George Floyd protests that were happening on his TV set. And he said, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something? Right. The Pentagon. I mean, the Posse Comitatus law says that the military may not turn its guns on Americans, period. But, I mean, even if it was technically legal, this is just way over the top. This is just way over the top. So just a flag for you on that. This is the mentality that Donald Trump and these neo-fascists in the Republican Party and on the hard right now have. Just shoot protesters. I mean, keep in mind, it was Donald Trump who used the military and tear gas to clear Lafayette Square so that he could take his picture holding a Bible. And frankly, I don't think it was so he could have his picture taken. I think it was so he could show his dominance over them. Him and Bill Barr walking out, strutting out there, yeah, we're, and you know, and the military helicopter coming down on top of the protesters and all that kind of stuff. This is not America. This is not the America that we hold as an ideal, or that the majority of Americans hold as an ideal. But this is the America that the Republican Party is aggressively moving us toward, where at some future point, after we've got President DeSantis in a Republican House and Senate, that if you show up in the streets with a protest sign, it'll be just like it is in Russia right now. You get hustled off to jail, or you get shot in the legs. By the way, I am convinced that one of the reasons that these guys went absolutely nuts about the George Floyd protests, particularly Trump, was because A, it was the largest protest in American history, but B, there were more white people than black people in aggregate in all those protests. And this has to have made them insane.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
By them, of course, I'm referring to the Trump humpers. We'll be back with your calls, your thoughts on all these issues from the day right after this break.
We're reading today from a book by David Sanger, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times national security reporter. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon, War, Sabotage, and Fear in the Cyber Age. We're reading from the preface. A year into Donald J. Trump's presidency, his defense secretary, Jim Mattis, sent the new commander-in-chief a startling recommendation. With nations around the world threatening to use cyber weapons to bring down America's power grids, cell phone networks, and water supplies, Trump should declare that he's ready to take extraordinary steps to protect the country. If any nation hit America's critical infrastructure with a devastating strike, even a non-nuclear one, it should be forewarned that the United States might reach for a nuclear weapon in response. Like most things in Washington, the recommendation leaked immediately. Excuse me. Many declared it a crazy idea and wild overkill. While nations had turned their cyber weapons against each other dozens of times in recent years, no attack had yet proven to cost a human life, at least directly. Not the American attacks on Iran's and North Korea's weapon programs, not the North Korean attacks on American banks, a famed Hollywood studio, and the British healthcare system, not the Russian attacks in Ukraine, Europe, and then at the core of American democracy. That streak of luck was certain to end soon, but why should Donald Trump or any of his successors take the huge risk of escalating a cyber war by going nuclear? The Pentagon's recommendation, it turned out, was the prelude to other proposals delivered to a president who values toughness and America first to use the nation's powerful cyber weapons far more aggressively. But it was also a reminder of how quickly the fear of devastating cyber attacks has moved from the stuff of science fiction and die-hard movies to the center of American defense strategy. Just over a decade before, in 2007, cyber attacks were missing entirely from the global threat assessment that intelligence agencies prepare each year for Congress. Terrorism topped that list, along with other post-9/11 concerns. Now that hierarchy has been reversed. For several years, a variety of cyber threats, ranging from a paralyzing strike on the nation's cities to a sophisticated effort to undercut public confidence in its institutions, has appeared as the nation's #1 threat on the list. Not since the Soviets tested the bomb in 1949 had the perception of threats facing the nation been revised so quickly. Yet Mattis, who had risen to 4-star status in a career focused in the Middle East, feared that the 2 decades spent chasing al-Qaeda and ISIS around the globe had distracted America from its most potent challenges. Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security, he said in early 2018. America's, quote, competitive edge has eroded in every domain of warfare, including the newest one, cyberspace. The nuclear strategy he handed Trump gave voice to an inchoate fear among many in the Pentagon that cyber attacks posed a threat unlike any other, one that we had completely failed to deter. The irony is that the United States remains the world's stealthiest, most skillful cyber power, as the Iranians discovered when their centrifuges spun out of control, and the North Koreans suspected as their missiles fell out of the sky. But the gap is closing. Cyber weapons are so cheap to develop and so easy to hide that they've proven irresistible. And American officials are discovering that in a world in which almost everything is connected, phones, cars, electrical grids, and satellites, everything can be disrupted, if not destroyed. For several years, the thinking inside the Pentagon was that only nations with nuclear weapons could threaten America's existence. Now that assumption is in doubt. In almost every classified Pentagon scenario for how a future confrontation with Russia and China, or even Iran and North Korea might play out, the adversary's first strike against the United States would include a cyber barrage aimed at civilians. It would fry power grids, stop trains, silence cell phones, and overwhelm the internet. In the worst-case scenarios, food and water would begin to run out. Hospitals would turn people away. Separated from their electronics and thus their connections, Americans would panic and turn against one another. The Pentagon is now planning for this scenario because it knows many of its own war plans open with similarly paralyzing cyber attacks against our adversaries, reflecting new strategies to try to win wars before a shot is fired. Glimpses of what this would look like have leaked out in recent years, thanks partly to Edward J. Snowden, partly because of a mysterious group called the Shadow Brokers, suspected of close links to Russian intelligence, obtained terabytes of data containing many of the tools that the National Security Agency used to breach foreign computer networks. It didn't take long for some of those stolen cyber weapons to be shot back at America and its allies in attacks whose bizarre-sounding names, like WannaCry, suddenly appeared in the headlines every week. Yet the secrecy surrounding these programs obscures most public debate about the wisdom of using them or the risks inherent in losing control of them. The government's silence about America's new arsenal and its implications poses a sharp contrast to the first decades of the nuclear era. The horrific scenes of destruction at Hiroshima and Nagasaki not only seared the national psyche, but made America's destructive capabilities, and soon Russia's and China's, obvious and undeniable. Yet even while the government kept the details classified, how to build atomic weapons, where they are stored, and who has the authority to order their launch, America engaged in a decades-long political debate about when to threaten to use the bomb and whether to ban it. The book, The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger.
And Lennox. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. 27 Republican senators sent a letter to the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, echoing talking points that the American Petroleum Institute pushed out on Twitter recently, saying that basically if we're going to stop importing Russian oil into the United States, which, by the way, the Russian oil imports into the U.S. are just a trickle. It's just a tiny drop in the bucket. If we're going to stop doing that, we need to, and these are some quotes from the API Twitter, we need to unleash America's energy. We need to release permits for energy development on federal lands. We need to issue offshore leasing plans for the next 5 years. We need to accelerate energy permitting infrastructure. We need to reduce regulatory and legal uncertainty. Right. It's a scam. And these 27 Republican senators are owned by the big fossil fuel companies because the Supreme Court allowed it with their Citizens United decision. We have to do something about this. There's a whole video rant about it over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. By the way, I just want to flag one interesting news story. I saw this actually over on Daily Kos first, but it's been reported elsewhere. The Russian army, Putin is having to basically drag in people from remote parts of Russia. In many cases, people who are racial minorities who have historically been discriminated against, particularly Asiatic minorities. And what's going on is that they're going into these places in Ukraine. When they take a town, they start looting it. And they're looting the homes. They're trying to take the appliances back home. They're stealing stuff left and right. And in the course of doing this, they're starting to fight about it. And this was just this amazing. I mean, here we get Russian troops from Buryatia deployed near Kherson have become increasingly resentful of the Kadriite Chechens. So this is two different ethnic groups who are both part of the military. Their task is to ensure that the units of Russian-occupied forces maintain active military action. In other words, that is to open fire on Russian troops who are trying to retreat. Things came to a head when the Chechens decided to keep all the loot to themselves. The Buryats decided to do a forcible redistribution, and a 50-person on each side firefight ensued. An army that leaves behind its wounded but never leaves behind its loot is not a unified fighting force. Also, reports of mutinies are multiplying. Russian Colonel Yuri Medvedev was run over by a tank and killed at the hands of his own brigade. 60 Russian paratroopers sent to Belarus to deploy to Ukraine staged a mutiny and refused to be deployed. And now there are reports that Putin's going in for cancer surgery right after their May 9th, their 4th of July celebration, which is on May 9th. Right after that, this is going to get interesting. And I think that the period between now and May 9th, which is just, basically a little more than a week away, is probably one of the most important and critical and dangerous times in this war. So, keep an eye on that and what's going on. Okay, let's pick up your phone calls here. Lawrence in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Lawrence. Thanks for listening to KTNF. What's up?
What she's talking about.
Lawrence?
You gotta have this on.
Lawrence is not there. Steve in Chicago. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I'm going to make a couple of points. And I think it's really important with regard to what you characterized in terms of the issues that the right is having in terms of who showed up relative to the BLM protest. Because I think that, they're terribly fearful that, that their children and grandchildren don't see the world that they do in the same way they do. And that's, again, a problem for them, because when you combine that change in demographics among the white community with African Americans and others, then obviously it represents a wave that they just can't come to terms with. But beyond that, I do worry about this notion about simply dismissing or going after people who we deem to be, shall we say, white supremacists, because then it begs the question, who gets to define what that means? Because it's easy to go after the Tom Metzgers and the David Dukes or the Donald Trumps, but then I've seen people called racists who reject some of the scholarship in the 1619 Project because doesn't stand up to scholarly rigor. Are they racist? Is someone who challenges the existing system of affirmative action, which, as argued, exploits African Americans for the sake of universities to bolster their numbers, but then graduation rates don't...
Steve, I'm just going to stop all this what many would describe as racist crap that's coming out of your mouth and move along. Thank you. Tony in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I just wanted to add my comment for when people ask why I still wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
I just look at them really strange, and I said, you must be a liberal. Then, of course, they'll say, well, no, I'm not. Why? Well, you should be wearing a mask because I'm trying to get away from the liberals and their facial recognition cameras.
I love it. Yes, I'm doing it to foil facial recognition. They're watching us, don't you know?
Exactly.
Oh, God. Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Tony, you win the prize so far today. Thank you very much for that. Mary in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Hello.
Hey.
I wanted to know, Medicare Advantage. I know you don't like it. I'd like to know why you don't like it.
Because with Medicare Advantage, the companies that sell the policies, when you sign up, they're given a big check. And every year they get a single check for you that's the exact same amount no matter what every year. I mean, it probably goes up with inflation. But so let's say that they're given $20,000 this year because you signed up. If you don't use $20,000 worth of services, they make a $20,000 profit. If you use $30,000 worth of services, they lose $10,000. So what happens is when you start getting expensive to them, they start turning down your claims. This is what the Inspector General for Medicare Services found in this report that was published last week. It was that as much as 18% of all claims of Medicare Advantage people get turned down by the insurance companies because the only way they make a profit is if they say no to you. On the other hand, if you have regular Medicare and, let's say that you pay $200 a week, a month, or, for your Medicare, $2,000 a year. Medicare is bringing in the $2,000. But if your medical expenses are $2,000, they pay it. If they're $5,000, they pay it. If it's $50,000 or $100,000 or $2 million, they pay it because it's the federal government and they've got a huge pot of money and they don't care if they make a profit or not. Their job is to make sure that your medical services are paid for. So there's a huge difference between real Medicare, which is where the government simply pays the bill, and that's why they don't require you to get advance permission from an insurance company before you can go to the hospital or get a procedure or even get a damn blood test. Between that and Medicare Advantage, where they make you jump through all those stupid hoops that insurance companies have historically made you jump through ever since insurance basically turned into a scam in the 1980s when state after state stopped requiring health insurance companies to be for-profit or not-for-profit organizations. So that's the answer, Mary, and that's the bottom line. If you go over to HartmannReport.com and the main page, over on the right-hand side, you will see 2 articles about the Medicare Advantage scam. I encourage you to read them. Patty in Cincinnati, Ohio. Hey, Patty, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Got a request from you. Nina Turner, we need her. And I would like for you to maybe do some research on your own end and do a rant, do whatever you got to do, put it on Twitter, and explain why we don't need Chantel Brown. Now, I can give you my
Why we don't need what?
Chantel Brown.
Oh,
and
hey,
why we need Nina
Patty,
Turner.
you are 10 minutes too early. In another 7 or 8 minutes, Cenk Uygur is going to be on the program with me explaining why he and his organization are throwing big bucks into this campaign. So you're right ahead of us. Patty, thanks for the call. AJ in La Mesa, California, and AJ, I think you're going to probably be our. Well, what's up, AJ? What's on your mind?
Why do I wear a mask? When somebody comes up to me, generally accosting me, why are you wearing a mask? My answer in a very pleasant tone is, for the same reason you're not. It's my choice.
Ha! Okay, another great one. All right.
Then if they want to pick a fight, I will point out to them, well, they don't filter that much and so on and so forth. Anyway, I hear the music. Tom, take care. I'm glad, Louise, and you are both well.
Okay, thank you, AJ. Yeah, we're working on it every day. Do appreciate it. Thanks so much for the call. We'll be back. It's 44 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be back in about 5 minutes here. On the other side of this break, Cenk Uygur is going to drop by. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth to multinational corporations we'd really rather you didn't know all about. We'll be right back. And welcome back. John in Seattle. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was watching your part about the virus and listening to the doctor, and he's exactly correct, everything he has said. There's an article in the SeattleTimes.com, this morning's paper, that says that subvariant shows virus could still get more contagious.
Right.
So if they can read on that, that is very important, because it's mutating is what's happening with the virus.
Right. And
it's starting to become more contagious.
Right, continuously. The original virus was replaced by the whatever they called the virus that swept America, and the European variant, I think it was called, and then that got replaced by the Delta, which used to be called the South African variant, and then that got replaced by BA2, which has now been replaced by BA 2.1212, and now that's being replaced by 4 and 5.
It's an F7041 mutation.
Geez. Yeah. Yeah.
So
what are you doing, John? How are you altering your life in with respect to this?
I'm trying to wear my mask whenever I go out, and staying vigilant.
Yeah.
With washing hands, keeping it, staying with it, being informed by the CDC. Listening to scientists about what's happening and reading up on it and learning more about it.
Yeah.
So, it's a genomic sequencing is what they call it.
Yeah.
And scientists are pretty smart about this. They say that it's just not over yet. It's,
I totally get it. Yeah. Saturday morning, Louise and I wanted to go out for breakfast. We haven't done this in so long, Yeah. And we drove around downtown and found a restaurant that had outdoor seating. And we went and sat at one of their chairs, and they brought by a menu and a cup of coffee and everything. And the staff person, the server, was wearing a mask, which was nice. Of course, nobody in the restaurant was wearing a mask, but on the outside, we were outside, and we felt quite safe. There was a nice breeze, and we were outdoors, and nobody got within 6 feet of us. And the food was delicious, and it was great. Our daughter went to the Hamilton play over the weekend, but they required proof of vaccination to get in, and everybody had to wear a mask throughout the entire play. And so you also had to, I think they also had to show proof of a negative COVID test. I'm not sure about that, but they definitely were requiring vaccination cards. And so it's like, here in Portland, there's a high level of acceptance, basically, of people who are concerned about not wanting to get COVID. I don't know how it is in Seattle there, John.
Well, Seattle is it's just open field. It's like everyone thinks that they're fine and they're good, and so there's a lot of people letting down their guards, and it's just not right,
We've got this huge public health experiment that we're going to find out the results to in probably a week or two, which was the White House Correspondents' Dinner. 3,000 people in one room.
Oh my God!
And I've been at 2 of those dinners. That HVAC system. In fact, somebody had a CO2 meter in there, and the carbon dioxide levels were over 2,000 parts per million, which means that basically no fresh air was being circulated into the room.
I stay away from crowds, Tom.
Yeah, I'm with you, John. I'm with you. Thanks a lot for the call.
Take care.
We'll be back. Stick around. 48 minutes past the hour. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. So did you hear the story about the 3 white guys, 20, 22, 24 years old, who just pleaded guilty to trying to attack power grids in 3 different parts of the United States According to the Justice Department, their scheme was that they were going to bring down electricity for 3 basically major cities or major regions of the United States. And the theory of this program is sort of like what Tim McVeigh was all about back in 1990, I think it was 3, when he blew up the federal building. Their scheme was that doing so, cutting off the power to these cities. Well, this is from the Department of Justice. Quote, the defendants believed their plan would cost the government millions of dollars and cause unrest for Americans in the region. They had conversations about how the possibility of the power being out for months would cause a race war and induce the next Great Depression. They had suicide pills and everything. Why aren't we talking about white terrorism in America? There's a video about this over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. 10 minutes before the hour. On the line with us is my old friend and colleague and respected colleague and who has built an empire for himself over at the Young Turks, TYT Network. TYT.com is the website. And, of course, Cenk Uygur, CENK, UY. It's Y. Is it UYGUR?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I've been misspelling your name all these years. Okay, Cenk, or at the Young Turks. That's an easy one. Cenk, you guys, you have I'm assuming it's a 501c4 that has been raising money for political purposes, and you're going to be directing some of it into Nina Turner's campaign. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's also a hybrid PAC as well. And this is the most important race in the country, Ohio 11 in Cleveland. Early voting has started, obviously, and the election is tomorrow, May 3rd. Nina Turner is progressive champion. Not only will she be another progressive vote, but more importantly, she'll be a progressive leader and a progressive fighter. On the other side is a classic corporate Democrat backed by the classic corporate Democratic members of Congress and by the same PACs and donors, including Trump donors, Republican donors, oil money donors, pharmaceutical company donors, etc. That's Shontel Brown. She's done nothing in Congress. She will continue to do nothing in Congress. So this is a massive race for progressives, by far the most important in the country. Yeah. So, you and I both, personally know Nina. I mean, she's just an extraordinary person, as is her husband. What are the, my hope, if Nina takes this position, one of the things that I love about her is that she is so good at communicating that she could become another, I hate to cliche this, but another AOC or, another one of these, another Bernie, another progressive champion who will speak out on issues and in ways that so many other Democrats, even progressive Democrats, are either a little timid about doing or frankly just don't have the public speaking skills. What do you think? Yeah. So that's exactly right, but I'd add on to it. So Nina is about as good a public speaker as you will ever see. So if anyone's going to make the progressive case the best that it can be made, it's Nina Turner. But on top of that, Tom, honestly, she has something that even AOC and Bernie Sanders don't have. She's willing to fight corporate Democrats. And so far, those two have been very meek about that. They've bought into the ideology that these are their friends and their colleagues, and that when they get screwed over by them, they should just, go along and I'll give AOC a ton of credit for being part of the 6 that voted no on decoupling infrastructure and Build Back Better. I've given her a ton of credit for that. And she's an excellent speaker. And Bernie made the case to the whole country, and we love him for it. But when it comes to Biden, he just will not speak out. He won't do it. Right now, all of them should be lighting into Manchin and Sinema. Manchin and Sinema are gone. They destroyed the entire Democratic agenda. At this point, it wouldn't even matter if they became Republicans because they're voting with Republicans and ending everything we care about.
Well, it would matter in as much as it would throw control of the Senate to Mitch McConnell, which is a big difference.
But Tom, how would it matter in terms of bills? Either way, we're not going to get $15 minimum wage. It would matter in terms
of getting judges through, getting political appointees through.
But Tom, those people are voting for our judges anyway. So, I mean, our Mansionist cinema then going to turn around and go, I'm now going to vote against the judges I was going to vote for because I have no principles at all.
No, my point is that if you put the Senate in the hands of Mitch McConnell, those people those nominations would not even come forward. But this isn't about the Senate, and we've gone down a rabbit hole here. So let's get back.
No, but Tom, here's the most important part.
What am I missing here? Yeah.
Okay, when you have the Democrats who are about to get slaughtered in 22 and probably in 24, they never make their own case. They all lay down because, Mansionist cinema, we wouldn't want to upset them. But then the American people never heard you say, God damn it, we need $15 minimum wage. We need universal health coverage for everyone. We need Medicare for all. I can't believe we didn't do voting rights. So if there isn't one Democrat in Washington right now who is willing to say that super loud and super strong, well, then we definitely need Nina Turner. She will definitely say it. And Tom, the messaging alone makes a difference. Will Democrats ever stand up for themselves? If you get Chantel Brown, you'll get the same exact thing now. Nonstop surrender, no fight back, no messaging. The American people have no idea what the Democratic principles or policies are. Wouldn't it be amazing if someone was shaking the rafters saying, we demand child tax credit. It's got 80% popularity. Tell me why you're against a bill that's got 80% popularity. But no Democrat right now will do that. Certainly Chantel has promised everyone that she will not do that because it would hurt the feelings of their beloved corporate Democratic colleagues.
Yeah, we've got a challenge like that right here in Oregon. And I typically don't involve myself in primaries, but here in Oregon, we've got Kurt Schrader. And and Jamie McLeod Skinner is trying to take him on, and she's a good progressive, and she is calling him out. And so we've got an internecine war going on here too. And I think it's a good thing. I think, frankly, it's healthy for the party.
That's exactly right. So the mainstream media makes it seem like Kurt Schrader and Jamie McLeod Skinner are the same person. Why is she even bothering to run? They say absurd things like that.
I'm with you.
No, he's a corporate Democrat, takes money from all the terrible industries, sells us out. We need Jamie McLeod Skinner to win. We need Nina Turner to win. Otherwise, you're never going to draw a distinction, and everybody's going to think that you're elitist like Democratic leadership who never intended to keep any of their campaign promises.
I am with you. Cenk, we're out of time, but thank you, and good on you. TYT.com, Cenk Uygur over on Twitter, and keep up the great work, my friend.
Thank you. Vote in Cleveland, Nina Turner.
There you go. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, get out there, get active, tag You're It, and vote for Nina Turner. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at HartmannReport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at Dinovite.com.
We say